and welcome back. We're now going to dive into some of the industry's hottest topics, Web3 and DeFi and their potential impact on marketing. And to lead the panel, I'm pleased to welcome Dan Held. Dan is the Director of Growth Marketing at Kraken. And Dan has experience at Uber on rider growth and growth marketing, and he's built some of the most popular early crypto products. Joining Dan for the panel are Brad Michelson, Head of US Marketing for eToro, and Michelle O'Connor, the Vice President of Marketing and Communication for TaxBit. So Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Peter. I'm really excited today to talk about how Web3, DeFi, and crypto will impact marketing. All three of us are building marketing teams and developing marketing processes in this space, and a lot of things change. I'm sure you all have seen NFTs and DeFi and Web3 be thrown around, and it's a fast-changing, fast-moving sector with a lot of new types of technology and a lot of new types of ways to influence and incentivize users to perform actions. So, to start out, Michelle, I want to start with kind of a question around what excites you about this space, and then we'll dig in a little bit more on the marketing side. But what are some other technologies or new developments in terms of new incentive models that really excite you personally?
That's a great question. So thanks for having me. This space over the last 12 months has really evolved, and we've really seen it jump mainstream. Having been in this space with my panelists for quite a few years, we've seen it really mature, and with that comes new offerings, new opportunities, and really the chance to build at scale while we're moving incredibly fast. Some of the things that I'm most excited about is really the opportunity to work with creators vis-a-vis some of the communities that we see out there that are really building around NFT projects, how we leverage those communities and building community at scale, while also looking at forward, how do we really help make it more approachable? Some of the barriers to entry are still pretty complex. I really enjoy the community model and incentivizing by word of mouth, and that's one of the things I'm most excited about of the opportunity, especially with NFTs.
Thanks, Michelle. And Brad, over to you, same question. What are you most excited about? What gets you energized? Tell the audience what you're most excited about.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me, Dan. I think to echo some of what Michelle was saying, the community side of it is fantastic. It's definitely one of the most exciting parts of working in a Web3 category. I also think that the through line of everything that we do is access to financial markets, right? Whether we're talking about NFTs or crypto assets, or even we're a multi-asset platform, so we also offer stocks and equities, and just being able to provide access to different markets around the world and overlaying that with community is a really powerful value proposition. So that's a real through line of our industry.
Now let's delve into that a little bit around the community aspect. So for those who aren't familiar, and I probably should have started with this, what is DeFi and Web3? So you've got the cryptocurrency space, which are assets like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin. Those are like your classic cryptocurrencies. Now, then there came about smart contract platforms like Ethereum and Solana. And with that, the Web3 DeFi movement sort of begun. And DeFi, what that means is decentralized finance. And Web3 stands for the next iteration of Web, instead of being Web 2, where things are centralized and you don't own your data, you don't own your assets. In Web3, you have more of ownership over those. So for the audience, those are the definitions behind both of those. In decentralized finance, that is the ability to take different financial components of the existing financial system and turn those into more decentralized versions of that. And so with that being caveated, when it comes to community, that drives a lot of the crypto ecosystem, where community essentially develops into people believe in the value of this asset. The asset grows, that allows for more money to be paid for developers to go build new tools and services and applications. When you think about applying that community to a product, I know, Michelle, you mentioned kind of word of mouth marketing or maybe like a referral program. Are there any other things, and I'll start with Brad this time. Brad, are there any ways that you've taken examples of how to build community that worked in the Web3 or DeFi ecosystems and applied that to the eToro model?
Yeah, I think that one of the funnest things about working in this category is that everything's a fresh slate, right? Yes, we're approaching similar audiences that might have been targeted by traditional fintechs, but we're always coming at it with a new lens. So one of the things we did years ago is try to find a way to insert ourselves in the community without being, an imposing force on it, right? Like, who likes a brand stepping into conversations where they're not welcome? So, we targeted Giphy, for example, which is the world's largest GIF search engine, where we just basically created content and branded the content. And we just SEO optimized from top to bottom to get to the top of the rankings. So whenever someone searched Bitcoin on Giphy, for example, a Bitcoin GIF showed up and our logo was on it also. So there's things like that, all going all the way down to being selfless as a brand to support the community, whether you're donating to particular groups to help forward their message or just being there as a resource to help spread their priority. Those are all areas that are really powerful for marketers in the Web3 space.
And Brad, I want to double click on the Giphy thing because I thought that was brilliant. By the way, I know Brad and Michelle super well. Brad told me about this years ago, and I thought it was a brilliant thing that he did. Can you walk through exactly what you guys did? I think we kind of casually mentioned it, but walk them through the strategy, and if you could, talk about impact.
Yeah, sure. So early days when we were working on introducing eToro into the US market, we were looking for low lift, high impact strategies that we can implement to get our name out there more. So one of the things that I thought about was the use of GIFs. And this was at a point, 3 years ago or so on Twitter, where half the replies to a tweet where it was just a GIF. And that's how people were communicating at the time. And it's still kind of the way, but, kind of shifted to other things. So basically what we did is we looked at the assets that were available on our platform. We looked at some of, the most common phrases that crypto Twitter might use. And we created, 2 sets of creatives per and uploaded that into Giphy. We got, our creator account set up. And then I did some light SEO research to understand top keywords. And, Giphy is not as sophisticated as Google, for example. So there aren't necessarily tools where you can mine, exact search volume, for example, but there is some light analytics that you can pull from Giphy. So SEO'd the heck out of that content, uploaded it. And in the first couple weeks, it was pretty obvious it was taking off. We found a couple assets in particular that were quite active on crypto Twitter in their own insular communities. And I think to date, we're in the hundreds of millions of views on those assets now. It's not uncommon to see some of our GIFs still being used today, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's I've heard it's called GIF Engine Optimization. And Giphy, by the way, feeds into a lot of different platforms, though. I think that was what I found really, really particularly interesting is that Giphy, like what was it, like Facebook Messenger, Twitter, and a few other platforms pull from Giphy. Yeah, WhatsApp. How'd you go through thinking through that?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was just Twitter, but then we realized that the reach is much further than that. Giphy doesn't exactly tell you where the GIFs are being seen, but if you spend enough time on crypto Twitter, you can look around and go through topics and try to identify where these assets are being used. And it was obvious that it wasn't 100% of the views that we were getting that were necessarily being seen on Twitter itself. It's definitely on Facebook. It's definitely on Instagram as well. WhatsApp is, they're all in the same ecosystem. They all use the same information to pull in GIF format. And it's an open API. So there's a number of platforms that use it. It was just a cool thing that it branched out beyond Twitter itself.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Brad. I thought that was a very fun, unique way of looking at marketing with the Web3 DeFi focus. And Michelle, a question I have for you. I know TaxBit has done a lot of awesome things in the physical world. Some of the events that you all throw, Web3 kind of talks about this purely digital world, but we forget that we're still humans and that we like to meet in person. how do you think through strategies around engaging this very digital community, that's primarily exists just digitally in the physical world, and how do you weave your brand into that?
That's a great question. So, Brad, I still use your eToro Bitcoin Rocket Giphy in our Slack quite often, so it still lives on.
Love that.
It's important when you think through it. It's kind of the irony of our industry is we want to be Web3, we want to be metaverse, we want to be online, but we all really still crave the in-person element. And I think that became more evident during the pandemic when that was less realistic. I always look at an event as a curated experience, and the goal is to have people come away with additional knowledge, understanding, and or relationships. So I don't want to push it as networking. I personally am rather introverted, and if something's labeled networking, I run the other direction. So I always make sure, what's the goal? Who do I want to have conversations, and almost envision those conversations happening when I'm creating that experience, and make sure to also invite different people across the industry. So not just, even though Dan and Brad, I look forward to seeing you at events, I want to make sure that it's people who work across the industry, if it's people who have contrarian opinions, so we can actually have some really cultivated and curated conversation to help further not only opinions, but really help everyone understand where we're all moving forward and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that those in-person experiences, Michelle, really are golden, where you have those conversations, you have that dialogue, you have that sharing of knowledge. It's just, there's no other way to really have that. And, starting with you again, Michelle, I'll kind of reverse the order here. When you guys think about your marketing mix in terms of, you look at the different channels to engage with the Web3 DeFi audience, are there any new ones that are different than like traditional marketing channels? Yeah, I know we have all the common levers that we press to talk to our audience, but are there any new ones?
So it has been a challenging channel, and it is still challenging, Discord. So if you look at Discord, traditionally in, legacy crypto, we had Telegram, right? Or WhatsApp, and that's kind of where you navigated, you had groups. Now, a lot of these have moved to Discord, and what I find challenging there is you can have these huge groups, there's different bots, and I'm finding the really good ones have heavy community moderation. There are some that are still scaling that don't understand the importance of having community moderators. We, as a tax company, and it's tax season in the crypto space, I spend a majority of my day with Discord open, seeing different questions that come in, making sure that myself or someone from my team is actively answering those, because it's a point of education and understanding. That's kind of the paramount for our community efforts. But Discord has been the one that, between that and Reddit, I could have multiple people full-time just in those channels, answering questions, cultivating community, identifying ambassadors. But it's that balance of, how do you have that in the mix, and what's the long-term return on it?
And Michelle, what sort of channels do these look like? Are these per crypto or per DeFi project, or where is TaxBit involved?
That's the art of what I'm trying to navigate now, coming out of tax season going forward. So right now it's mainly specific projects. So if it's an NFT project, or if it's one of the Web3 community projects like Friends with Benefits or some of those, I've been invited to in those Discords as the tax expert vis-a-vis TaxBit. And what I'm finding is there's a lot of smart conversation that happens, and how do we navigate that? And that's where you can really have a wonderful experience, where someone who could be, they're anonymous as well, because it's their Web3 identity, you don't quite know who you're talking to, and then you build that rapport, and then it turns into, oh, you're actually this person, and how do we bridge that gap? And I've engaged with some influencers and other folks who were living in the anon world, and once they kind of got their problem solved, it flips to like, oh, this is who you are, and this is how we work together. So it's interesting, and I was explaining to someone the other day, I look at it as legacy crypto and DeFi crypto, and legacy crypto lives on Twitter. We're all on Twitter. And then this new emergence of the NFT and DeFi space, they are still on Twitter, but they really live and breathe, from what I found, in the Discord world.
And Brad, I'd be very curious to hear your answer to the same question.
Yeah, so I think that on this narrative of community being a large driver, I think something that goes hand in hand with community is content. So we invest quite a bit in analysis and educational content for our users. And as an extension of that, we've seen growth just through, organic word of mouth providing of that educational content to our users. But beyond that, leveraging platforms like Taboola as an ad platform to help spread the word of that content, right? So you can do some light SEO work trying to understand what are the top, questions being asked for people who are searching for questions related to Bitcoin, for example, right? You can come up with an article and you put it within your resource center, and then you can promote that article. You know that there's a large number of people on the internet, whether it's in your country or another, looking for these articles. So all of a sudden you've created high value, lower funnel content to drive those new users to your platform. And it's not always for conversion's sake, right? Part of growing your brand is being a resource for your users. So we found some really great success there.
And with, I've got a kind of a tricky question, and I'll leave it up to either or who wants to answer first. With Web3 and DeFi, sometimes people can be pseudonymous. They've got a name like Bob552, but we don't know who really is behind the name. Does that change how you target, or that change how you think about content? I mean, it's kind of an open canvas here to talk about it.
I think that there's pros and cons to both, right? Like on Michelle's side, it's probably a slightly different answer because there's individualized tax advice versus sort of just general education. But on our side, the nature of our platform is that we're a social investing platform. So there are social feeds where any of our 28 million users will talk trading strategy or market sentiment. Someone will come on and they'll be in Italy and they'll be like, what do you think of this? And then someone from the US will be like, well, here's my take on that. So for us, the anonymous, not anonymous side of it is not that big of a deal. In fact, I think on the crypto side of things, it's largely encouraged, right? We just want people to feel comfortable enough to engage with others and help educate the community through their experience.
So I think it's been really interesting, the anonymous, going back to your question about in person. It's very uncomfortable when you go to meet someone in person and you've gotten to know them online and they're a JPEG, or you're not quite sure who you're actually meeting. What I have found is it's a beautiful balance of both. So we're not going to, some people operate more comfortably when they're more anonymous, and if it's vis-a-vis a pseudonym or acronym, looking at how to get their personality and what they're looking for, and then building education. And to Brad's point, I always look at everything first. How do we make people feel empowered, comfortable, and safe navigating this still new and complex environment? If the benefit is they sign up for TaxBit afterwards, that's an added bonus. But I always approach all of our content strategy and everything is, how are we going to educate someone? We obviously operate in tax, which is very complex. Most people don't think about tax and get a big smile on their face or look forward to it. But there's actually a lot of opportunity within the crypto space where we can have some tax advantages. So I always like to flip the narrative, and how can we make it to Web3 a gamification of traditional elements and aspects, and leveraging some of those anonymous personalities based on who they are online, and helping work with them to make them feel more comfortable and take the complexities of both crypto and tax and make it gamified and more approachable.
That's a great segue, Michelle. And I'll start with you first, Brad. Gamification and incentives, those run the crypto ecosystem. A lot of what we see in DeFi, a lot of what we see with new technologies like AMMs or yield farming, these are based on proper incentive models. Even Bitcoin itself has an incentive model. Have those changed how you think through like user acquisition or how you think about rewarding your existing customers?
Yeah, I think that you kind of just said it best right there. It's about how you reward your customers. Sometimes that's a monetary reward, and sometimes it's perks that could be, access to an event or a tool that they might not have or a subscription that they might not have otherwise. So for every brand and every priority, it's sort of different. We do experiment quite a bit with financial incentives, whether they're trade-based or deposit-based incentives. Those drive more directly to our North Star KPIs. So we experiment with that quite a bit, but then we also have on our platform what's called eToro Club, which is for users with $5,000 or more in realized equity on the platform. So those people get added features for being, lower funnel customers for us, basically. And we find it to be a great retention tool. It's more reason for people to stay around, and it just provides stickiness on the platform. And I do recommend to people quite often that playing with incentives or perks throughout your funnel is a great way to not only just bring in new users, but to keep people endeared to your brand at all times. Because at the end of the day, from a brand perspective, that's the main goal.
And Michelle, what are your thoughts on incentives and rewards for your TaxBit customers?
It's a necessary part of our ecosystem. To Brad's point, I test it a lot. When I started at TaxBit, we were still very early stage. We had an introductory affiliate model set up, the traditional refer this person, get this reward. I've continued to iterate that as we scale and grow. And then I've identified our power referrers, engagers, and they're actually now brand ambassadors. Once they hit certain levels, they get VIP swag, they get invited to events. When we have meetups in person, they get invited to be our guest of honor. So it's really been wonderful to identify who's engaging, and it's a mutually invested scenario where it's not us paying someone for something and then they do it. They're incentivized to invest in the brand and really get to know who we're doing and what we're doing. That's been something that I've really looked at for our model through not only folks in the crypto space, but CPAs and other traditional educators who bridge or are starting to touch in crypto, and how we work to help them get more onboarded in the space and then incentivize them through referral models to drive their audience to us.
Awesome. Appreciate that color, Michelle. Thanks for digging in on that. And we've got 5 minutes left. Brad, Michelle, I'll leave it open to you two. Is there anything you wanted to cover that I didn't bring up? There's such a large surface area here for the crypto space that I'm sure there's something I didn't ask. What's a topic you guys would like to cover in the last 5 minutes?
Something I think about a lot is the crypto ecosystem in particular is, it's a small space. Like Dan, Michelle, we've got like a bunch of other marketers that we keep in touch with. And one thing that's come up time and time again in our conversations is that, although in a lot of ways we compete against each other for a piece of this pie, at the same time, we're all working together to increase the size of the pie, right? Every time we run a Facebook ad or a Twitter ad, it's, an ad for the asset class, not just necessarily the platform. So I think that when you're looking through the lens of, a Web3 company, you're not just selling your services, because there are always going to be a number of other options with a very similar value proposition, but you're also selling people on the asset class. And maybe that's the biggest challenge to us as marketers, as well as how to market this asset class or this category to the average consumer and widen that pie for everybody.
I think that's a great point. I love that we have a community where it's kind of the rising tide raises all ships. One thing that I get asked a lot is if people think of Web3 and DeFi, it can kind of be intimidating if you've been a traditional marketer or you're looking on how to get into our space and actually work on this side. What I've encouraged people is, because there's so much content, educational opportunity, it's still very early and there's still wonderful opportunities. Most of the companies in our space are hiring, and it doesn't have a requirement of you have to have previous experience. I would say a few years ago, that was probably less so, and the barrier to entry was higher. Now, thankfully, there's a lot more content, as well as the companies, I think, have evolved to bridge kind of mainstream. So for anyone looking to get into Web3 or join companies, it's still very early, and I wouldn't let lack of previous experience be a barrier to entry.
That's a great point, Michelle. I feel like the space is so much bigger than it used to be, and there's so many opportunities for folks to join. It's funny, on my marketing org, so I lead growth marketing, I actually like to hire people who aren't crypto native. It keeps us all honest when we look at content and we're going, hey, does this content make sense? Is the language that we're using, does this make sense to a normie, someone who isn't in the crypto space? And so, yeah, I think that there's a huge amount of opportunities for folks who aren't in it. It might sound confusing, it might sound weird. We all went through that stage years ago, but everyone goes through it. So there is a period of being a little uncomfortable, but we definitely want to welcome everyone into this space. And Michelle, where can people learn more about TaxBit?
You can find us on Twitter at TaxBit or at taxbit.com.
And Brad, same for you.
You can find us on Twitter at eToro US for our US handle, and at eToro.com.
And for Kraken, it's at KrakenFX on Twitter or Kraken.com. And with that, want to give a round of applause to the panelists. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Brad. I'll be seeing you guys both in Bitcoin Miami, I think. So it's it's a close circle in the crypto space. But appreciate you all participating. And Peter, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks so much, everybody, and to the panel. Really got a lot out of your session today, especially the idea of building community in the physical space, incentivizing people to stay around the platform and doing content analysis. Really, I think this is the face of modern advertising. And we really got a lot out of it. So thank you for joining us today.